Imagine you are evaluating a high-end sports car. You really want to see what it can do, so you take it out to a test track.
Right, open it up.
Exactly. You measure the horsepower, the handling, the top speed, and, the engineering is flawless. The car performs beautifully.
Sounds like a good car.
It is. But then you hand the keys over to a typical driver for their daily commute. And suddenly, the car barely makes it out of the driveway.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it is constantly stalling, the engine is sputtering, and, everyone just assumes the car itself is incredibly difficult to drive, or worse, that it's just poorly designed.
Right. They blame the car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the car isn't broken at all. The driver is just, completely ignoring the push-to-start button, attempting to hotwire the engine, and then blaming the vehicle when it doesn't work.
It's a profound misdiagnosis of the problem. You're blaming the machinery instead of looking at the operator's manual.
Right. And as we are going to explore today, that is pretty much the perfect lens for understanding a biological and, sociological mystery that has puzzled humanity for centuries.
It really is.
So welcome to the deep dive. Our mission on this show is always to be your shortcut to being well-informed. We take a massive stack of sources, read through all that dense research, and extract the crucial nuggets of insight that you actually need to know.
And today's question is a big one.
Oh, it's huge. Today, we are bringing you along to answer a monumental question. Do men and women experience orgasms differently?
It's a question that forces us to look at the intersection of our raw biology, our psychology, and, the unspoken rules of society that govern our most intimate moments.
To figure this all out, we have pulled together a genuinely fascinating stack of sources for you. We're looking at a comprehensive 2024 scoping review from the Journal of Sex Research, several neuroscientific articles from Gizmodo, and the wildly unconventional historical archives of the famous clinical sexologists Masters and Johnson.
The Masters and Johnson stuff is just wild.
Yeah, completely wild. So we are going to explore the biology of pleasure, the bizarre history of how sex was first measured in a laboratory, and a massive statistical phenomenon known as the orgasm gap. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, to really understand what happens between people in the real world, we first have to strip away the social context entirely.
Right. Get down to the basics.
Exactly. We need to look at the raw biological machinery. And physiologically speaking, if we just look at the brain, the male and female orgasm are remarkably similar.
Which, that feels completely counterintuitive.
Right, because popular culture tells us they're fundamentally different experiences.
Yeah, men are supposedly simple, women are supposedly complex. But the Gizmodo articles we reviewed, they look at modern brain scans, specifically PT and fMRI imaging, and they paint a completely different picture of what's happening under the hood.
Yeah, and we need to look at how those scans actually work. An fMRI, for instance, it basically maps blood flow in the brain. The logic is simple, Where blood goes, oxygen goes, and where oxygen goes, neurons are firing rapidly.
Makes sense.
So there was this fascinating study by a neuroscientist named Janiko Georgiadis, where he mapped this cerebral blood flow in both men and women during different stages of intimacy.
Okay, and what did he find?
Well, what he found was that during the initial buildup, the arousal phase, the activation patterns in the brain do actually look different.
Which makes anatomical sense, right?
It does, yeah. The physical stimulation of a penis versus the physical stimulation of a clitoris. It just sends different initial sensory signals up the spinal cord.
It's basically like playing the exact same video game, but one person is using a PlayStation controller and the other is using an Xbox controller.
Oh, I like that.
Right. Like the physical buttons you have to press on the outside are laid out differently. You have to use different inputs. But the internal console, the software processing the game, is running the exact same code.
That is a great way to visualize it. Because Georgiadis found that the moment of climax itself lights up the brain in near identical ways across genders.
Wow. So identical.
But yeah, the software program running at the point of release is virtually indistinguishable. And there's another study by researchers Nan Wise and Barry Komisaruk that used high-resolution fMRI scans to map the exact neurological time course of the climax.
Oh, like a second-by-second breakdown.
Exactly. And they identified a very specific loop.
Break down that loop for us. What is actually happening in the brain at that moment?
So in both men and women, they observed a significant interaction between two key areas, the frontal pole and the paracentral lobule.
Okay, frontal pole first. What is that?
The frontal pole is essentially the brain's executive control center. It handles planning, self-awareness, and, crucially, inhibition. Think of it as the brain's brake pedal.
Got it. And the other one? The paracentral lobule.
That's the sensory hub that processes physical touch. So, at the moment of climax, that frontal pole, the brake pedal, effectively shuts down or loops directly into that sensory hub.
Wait, so the part of your brain that normally manages your daily anxieties, the voice that says, hey, let's be careful, let's maintain control, that just goes completely offline.
Completely offline.
So it hands the steering wheel entirely over to the sensory processing center. It's the brain's literal mechanism for completely letting go.
Exactly. And that exact same neurological loop happens regardless of gender.
That's wild.
It is. And from an evolutionary standpoint, an evolutionary psychologist named Alan Fogel proposes a really compelling theory as to why our brains are wired to do this in the exact same way.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Why?
He suggests that men and women may have evolved these identical orgasmic responses to enhance human empathy.
Wait, if all for empathy, I mean, I have to push back on that a little bit.
Sure.
That sounds a bit too poetic, or you like something out of a Hallmark card.
Yeah.
If nature just wanted us to bond and feel empathy for each other, why make the female anatomical hardware so heavily dependent on stimulation that isn't even strictly necessary for reproduction?
It's a fair question. But Fogel's argument is rooted in how humans build deep social bonds. Shared experiences of intense emotion, they help us connect on a fundamental level.
Like shared trauma or shared joy.
Exactly. When we see someone experiencing profound grief, our mirror neurons fire, and we feel a shadow of that sadness. Fogel argues that observing a partner's intense emotional and physical vulnerability during orgasm enhances our own body sense and readiness.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, evolutionarily, if male and female orgasms were radically different subjective experiences, that deep empathetic mirroring would be much harder to achieve. A shared neurological language of pleasure essentially forces us to bond.
Okay, assuming that evolutionary theory holds up and the neurological software is identical, we still have a massive contradiction here.
We do.
If the software is identical, why do men and women report such wildly different experiences and success rates in real life? Do we just not understand the hardware?
Well, to understand why we are so confused about the hardware today, we have to look at how the medical community first attempted to map this biological response.
The history of it.
Right. We have to rewind to the 1950s.
Which brings us to the historical archives of William Masters and Virginia Johnson. And, for context for the listener, before them, the most famous sex researcher was Alfred Kinsey.
Right. Kinsey was huge.
But Kinsey was essentially just doing surveys. He interviewed people about what they did behind closed doors, which, relies entirely on people actually telling the truth.
And people are notoriously unreliable narrators of their own private lives, especially in the 50s.
Exactly. So Masters and Johnson wanted objective clinical data. They launched their clinical sexology research at Washington University in 1957.
Right, they didn't want to just hear stories. They wanted to measure heart rates, muscle contractions, and blood pressure in real time.
Which means someone had to actually watch and measure. I mean, they literally wired up volunteers to medical equipment in a laboratory.
It's crazy to think about.
Picture the conservative 1950s, right? You've got fluorescent lights, white coats, EKGs, and they're observing humans having sex.
The sheer audacity of it is incredible. And, initially, they couldn't just put an ad in the local paper.
No, of course not.
The risk to their careers, not to mention the obscenity laws of the time, was immense. So they recruited prostitutes for the early stages of the study.
Which makes sense practically.
It did. Sex workers were knowledgeable, they were comfortable with their bodies, and most importantly, they were willing to perform while hooked up to a tangle of wires and heart monitors.
And as the social stigma slowly lessened over time, they shifted to community volunteers. And the scale of their research is just staggering.
Oh, it's massive.
They observed 382 women and 312 men over an astonishing 10,000 complete cycles of sexual response.
10,000.
10,000. They were so relentless in their pursuit of data that they even experimented on themselves.
Yeah.
And they would arbitrarily pair completely random strangers into, assigned couples just to observe how unfamiliar bodies interacted physically in the lab.
It is about as far from a romantic setting as you can possibly get. But the data they extracted from those 10,000 cycles was groundbreaking. They mapped out the 4-stage sexual response cycle that medical textbooks still use today.
Right. That's excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution.
Exactly.
And what did that data tell them about the female hardware specifically?
What's fascinating here is how their lab findings completely destroyed the societal assumptions of the era. Up until that point, the dominant psychological theory was dictated by Sigmund Freud.
Good old Freud.
Right. Freud had convinced the world that women experience two distinct, separate types of orgasms.
Okay.
He claimed there was a clitoral orgasm, which he deemed immature and adolescent, and then there was a vaginal orgasm, which he considered mature, and the ultimate healthy goal of intercourse.
Which is an incredibly damaging theory. Freud basically convinced an entire generation of psychiatrists that if a woman couldn't climax from traditional intercourse alone, she was somehow psychologically stunted or neurotic.
Exactly. But Masters and Johnson's physiological data proved Freud was entirely making things up. Yeah, by measuring the actual muscle contractions and biological responses, they proved there is no difference. The biological event is exactly the same regardless of where the stimulation originates.
That's a huge paradigm shift.
It was. Furthermore, their lab data proved that unlike men, women lack a physiological refractory period.
The refractory period being the biological reset clock. Like, men generally require a significant period of time before they can reach climax again.
Yes. But women do not have that biological limitation. Masters and Johnson proved that women are biologically capable of multiple successive orgasms in a single session.
Wait, really?
Yes. So if we look purely at the hardware, women are actually biologically equipped for a significantly higher frequency of climax than men.
But, okay, let me stop you there, because we have to question the methodology of this entire operation.
Okay, go ahead.
Is having sex while hooked up to wires in a clinical lab, monitored by scientists with clipboards, sometimes paired with a complete stranger, is that really indicative of normal human sexuality?
You are hitting on the exact critique leveled by prominent feminist researchers, particularly Schur-Haidt.
Oh, she pushed back on this.
She heavily criticized Masters and Johnson for this highly artificial setting. She argued that treating sex purely as a mechanical, biological friction machine strips away all the personal, cultural, and emotional context that actually defines human intimacy.
Right. It's reducing a complex human interaction to a plumbing diagram.
Yeah.
And Haidt also pointed out how damaging their framing could be. By publishing this data saying, look, the machinery is perfectly capable of multiple orgasms, it subtly implied that women who don't organically achieve this in the real world are somehow dysfunctional.
Which is a brilliant transition into the modern data. Because if we take Masters and Johnson's lab results, which prove the female hardware is incredibly capable, and compare them to what people are actually experiencing on a Friday night in the real world, the whole theory of biological equality falls apart.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If the laboratory says everything should work perfectly, the data from the wild shows a glaring, undeniable contradiction. We are talking about a phenomenon sociologists call the orgasm gap.
Yeah, the orgasm gap. To understand the sheer scale of this gap, we looked at a 2024 scoping review by researchers McElroy and Perry. They synthesized 30 years of sociological data on heterosexual encounters.
Give us the breakdown. How wide is this gap?
It is massive. In a deeply researched U.S. representative sample, men reported experiencing an orgasm at their most recent sexual encounter 91% of the time.
91%.
For women, that number was only 64%.
Wow.
And another massive aggregate study looked at overall averages across multiple encounters. It found that heterosexual men average orgasms 86% of the time they have sex, compared to just 62% for women.
Let's slow down and translate that number soup for you, the listener. What that means in practical terms is that if a heterosexual couple is intimate 10 times, the man is likely reaching the finish line 9 out of those 10 times. Meanwhile, the woman is left waiting and unfulfilled almost half the time. That is a staggering disparity.
It is. But the 2024 scoping review reveals a crucial paradigm-shifting twist. This disparity is not biological.
It's not.
No. We know this because when researchers look at solo masturbation, the gap vanishes. Women's orgasm rates skyrocket to near parity with men.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One study highlighted in a review found that 92% of women usually or always reach climax when they are alone.
So 92% alone versus just over half the time with a partner.
Yes, that number drops to just 57% when a male partner is introduced. Meanwhile, men's rates stayed at a rock-solid 91% whether they were solo or partnered.
This brings us right back to the sports car analogy from the beginning of the show. On the solo test track, when the driver knows exactly how the vehicle works, the car performs flawlessly 92% of the time. But the moment a passenger gets in the car, performance drops off a cliff. So if the machinery works perfectly in solo mode, the issue has to be user error or a terrible instruction manual, right?
Yeah.
What exactly is going wrong when a partner is introduced?
Well, sociologists have a name for that terrible instruction manual. They call it gendered sexual scripts.
Gendered sexual script.
Nice. A sexual script is the unwritten cultural template for how an intimate encounter is supposed to unfold. It is the societal programming that dictates who initiates, what activities are considered essential, and what the ultimate goal is.
But where do we even get these scripts? It's not like they hand out a syllabus in high school.
I mean, we absorb them from everywhere. From mainstream movies, from pornography, from romance novels, and from historically terrible sex education.
Fair point.
And the predominant script in heterosexual culture is overwhelmingly male-centric. It centers entirely around penile vaginal intercourse, or PVI. The script dictates that PVI is the main event. Everything that happens before it is categorized as mere foreplay, and the encounter officially ends when the male reaches climax.
So this male-centric script is essentially treating the main event for women as foreplay, or just skipping it entirely. It has rigged the game before the encounter even begins.
That is precisely what is happening. The scoping review points out that the primary driver of the orgasm gap is the lack of specific clitoral stimulation during these encounters, because the script simply doesn't prioritize it. The statistics on this are profound. One study showed that 37% of women never reach climax from PVI alone.
37%.
Yeah.
More than a third.
Yes. But of that exact same group of women, 87% experienced an orgasm when specific clitoral stimulation was added to the encounter.
That's a massive jump.
It is. And another fascinating study out of Finland found similar results. Only 6% of Finnish women stated they orgasm from vaginal stimulation alone. Compare that to a massive 88% who explicitly stated they require clitoral stimulation or a combination of both to reach the finish line.
So the manual is just completely wrong for the hardware, which means context must be everything. If people are relying on this default broken script, the gap must fluctuate wildly depending on how well the partners know each other.
Yeah, it absolutely does. The orgasm gap is at its absolute worst in scenarios with high ambiguity, where people feel awkward and just fall back on those default societal expectations.
Like when they don't know each other well.
Right. We see this most clearly in casual hookup culture or during a person's sexual debut.
First times are notoriously awkward anyway, but the numbers the review highlighted for sexual debuts are genuinely heartbreaking.
They are. In first-time encounters, the data shows 70 to 79% of young men experience a climax. For young women, it's a dismal 7 to 8%.
Wow, 7 to 8%. That is an unbelievable chasm.
And in casual hookups, where there is very little communication and heavy reliance on just rushing to that main event of PVI, the gap remains huge. But as the context changes, the script can change. The gap shrinks significantly in committed relationships.
Because in a relationship, you actually talk to each other. You have the time to build trust, communicate specific needs, and essentially throw away that default male-centric manual to write a custom script that actually works for both people.
Precisely. The review noted that for young women, orgasm rates jumped from 11% with a brand new partner to 67% once they were in a relationship lasting over 6 months.
That makes so much sense.
And we see the ultimate proof of this when we look at same-sex couples. The gender of the partner matters immensely. Lesbian women report reaching climax with a familiar partner 75% to 86% of the time.
Oh, wow. That is drastically higher than heterosexual women in similar relationships.
It is. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this completely dismantles the myth that the female climax is biologically elusive or mysterious or inherently difficult to achieve. When the phallocentric script is removed entirely, as it is in lesbian relationships, or when heterosexual partners are familiar enough to communicate and prioritize the right hardware, the gap naturally closes.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Let's trace our steps. We started with the brain and the biology, proving that the hardware and software are universally capable. I mean, they light up the exact same pathways in men and women.
Right, perhaps to foster that deep evolutionary empathy we talked about.
Exactly. Then we traveled through the clinical, wire-tangled laboratories of the 1950s, where Masters and Johnson proved the female hardware isn't just capable, it's actually built for higher frequency than men.
Defying all the societal assumptions of the time.
Right. And finally, we arrived at the modern sociological data. The takeaway. The orgasm gap isn't a biological destiny, it's a social habit. It's about how we communicate, the scripts we follow, and who we prioritize. The sports car works perfectly. We just need to teach people how to use the push-to-start button.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final provocative detail from that 2024 scoping review.
Oh, please do.
The researchers found that accurate anatomical knowledge, specifically understanding the clitoris, is negatively related to holding male-centric sexual scripts.
Wait, meaning what?
meaning education literally disrupts the default social programming.
Wow.
Which raises an incredible question for you to mull over. If the orgasm gap is entirely a social construct built on outdated, unequal scripts, what happens to the broader power dynamics of our society when couples finally learn to completely close that gap? How does it change how we demand equality, how we communicate our needs, and how we divide emotional labor in every other aspect of life?
Because if you can rewrite the script in the bedroom, you might just rewrite the script everywhere else. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.